Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Game Logic from the Rounding Off Infinity Gaming channel on YouTube, one of the co-hosts of the Enough to Keep Going weekly games podcast on the E2KG Network podcasting channel on YouTube, back with another episode. This is episode number 382 in the year of our gaming, 2025, on the 6th of April. Here with me, almost as always, but also with 33% of the cast being someone who's not always here, but they are still my stalwart and earnest partners in crime. We'll start with Swissguard. How you doing, Swiss?
Doing really good. I think it was 8 years ago we were all together for a very similar special edition of, I think it was the Enough to Keep Going podcast at that time.
Yeah, and predictions around the multiverse were very similar at people guessing badly on whether or not the Switch was going to succeed. But we'll get into that later. Tao, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm doing well. Such big news that we had to bring Swiss out of the woodworks.
That's right. We had to call up the big guns out of reserve.
Call back up.
So tonight, as always, we will still do our segment one. We're going to try and keep that short tonight, but we will start off, as always, with our main gamer experience stories for the week. Swiss, tonight, we're starting with you, who has been playing Braid Anniversary Edition.
Yep. I've been getting into like Jonathan Blow's like gaming library recently, which isn't that big, but been listening to some of his like game design podcasts and whatnot. So I dove in, wanted to try out his games, and started with Braid Anniversary Edition. I have The Witness on Steam, but I haven't played it yet. I really enjoyed the puzzles. There's a little bit of a graphic upgrade. I think Braid, a lot of people have already played at this point. So I won't get into the gameplay too much or do any spoilers. The angle that I wanted to talk about tonight was like the Anniversary Edition piece. So in addition to a little bit of a graphical lift, facelift, they and some sound effect stuff, they did commentary, which, you know, I kind of got pulled in because having listened to game design podcasts with Jonathan Blow. So I was really eager to dive into the commentary, and they got a lot of the people that were involved in the game and everything to do it. It's a little bit of a mixed bag. I played all the way through, did all the puzzles, and then I dove into the commentary. I almost wish they would have just had some sort of unlockable set of videos or something, because what you do is there's like a hub and you kind of go through a door and you'll appear in like the levels and can turn on the commentary. So it's a little bit kind of like a, you know, Blu-ray commentary or something where you're watching the movie and you can hear them talking about it. So you can you're in the game and playing the game, but they'll be talking about the puzzle or the graphics or something, and it's like I just want to focus on what they're talking about. And then sometimes they'll want to show it, and they'll put like a picture in picture. You can make that bigger. It just I don't think was executed quite like they had hoped, because I think it would have been more effective as like a documentary, and I would have really been into it. The actual information that they provide is great. I was really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying listening to it. It's just a little bit tedious to get to that point. But if you haven't picked up Braid, I think I paid $5 for it. So it's even the anniversary edition. So it's a nice thing to play. It's quick, but the puzzles are fun. So.
Sorry. So, so is there anything else that's included in the anniversary edition? I think kind of what you were going over was just kind of like the director's commentary, right? That goes on in the background of the game. But anything else that comes with the anniversary edition?
I don't recall if they added any puzzles or anything like that. They might have added one or two things. I think like your little hub house might have had one or two additions, but they didn't wildly vary the gameplay or anything like that. I know they didn't edit the puzzles, because one of them he was talking about was like, yeah, if I could do it over again, like I probably like, if I had known now what I knew then, I probably would have done this puzzle differently or something like that. So they didn't go that far. They left the game pretty much intact in that regard. So I think the goal was mostly to get it out to more people that maybe hadn't experienced it before, with HD graphics, and then provide that commentary.
Okay, but anything like artwork or like a digital art
Oh,
book or
well,
soundtrack
yeah,
or
like,
anything?
so the nice thing about the commentary, it's not just him doing the puzzles. So he has he has programming, he's got art. So like I had a nice there was a nice one on like the home screen with like the red in the background and what the artist was going for. And there's they showed some of Jonathan Blow's programmer art that he was like giving to the artists to kind of figure out, hey, like, this is what I'm building, how would you like to proceed? So there's a lot of that there, but again, it's like hard. You can go through the hub world and get to it, but you kind of also are popping around in the maps to experience it as well. So I didn't care for that too much. But music, the music director was there, and they had some interesting things about how it added just ambient things in the background. So there were subtle things that they added to the game. They kind of talked about how that affected the experience for the player, the anniversary edition versus the original edition and stuff like that. So if you're into the game, there is a lot there, like commentary track wise, that you can really sink your teeth into.
All right, very cool. Tao, any questions on that one? All right, I want to go ahead and move on to game number 2. So Tao, you are up in the queue with a game that's been getting quite a lot of discussion this week, but I haven't been able to tell which way the wind is blowing on this one.
It's been really back and forth from what I've seen, a little I've seen online so far. Mostly positive, though, I think, for the most part. And that's Inzoi, which is the life simulator, a la, like The Sims. Well, basically The Sims. It's the only other one I can think of. I mean, as far as like people-wise. So you control, you have your little Zoi, as they call them, in the game that you create. And actually, they had to call it a demo, but basically it was just like the character creator. They had released, I think, like a week. I saw it a week before, but it might have been really. I think you're able to get it maybe even a couple weeks before. You had to do like watch some Twitch streams or something to get like a key or whatever code. But I just picked up like the week before, and I was able to. I played around a little bit with it because I was kind of busy at the time, which was actually pretty neat. It's everything's 3D in this world, so it's a 3D characters and it looks really nice. Actually, looks really nice. Even like once the character creator looks really good, and then once you get them into the game, it looks pretty much the same. I've seen some people like online where it's like, hey, I created this character in the character creation, and then they show like the in-game character and it looks a little off. But I think for the most part, at least from the couple that I've done so far, they've they've been pretty spot on once I've created it and thrown it into the actual game. But yeah, you create your character. You get I think there's 4 or 5 different like towns within the world that you can kind of pick and kind of drop your character in, like a beach scene. I think there's one I did right now. There's like suburbs, a city. There might be one other one, like maybe a small village or something. But you do that, and once you go in there, you can. I was able to put down a home and just kind of like a prefab home that you can select from. I think you might be able to actually build it out if you want to, but I just kind of wanted to throw a house down, and I can always create. You can do multiple saves. Um, I just want to throw something down so I could start playing. Just see how the game was. I just threw like a little. I think it's like a 1-bedroom house down on the slot, and did it that way. I kind of rearranged a little bit of the house itself, which you can do. I kind of rearrange the out or kind of customize the outside, even though I'm like on a beach. It's kind of like a little city by the beach, a little town by the beach. I did it like almost like a wood cabin kind of look on the outside. The inside's a whole different matter. I was just kind of messing around. So I think kind of just getting my feet wet with the game itself. But yeah, it's pretty cool. I've been having a good time with it. I mean, it's basically just like a prettier version of The Sims so far. One thing is, it is early access right now, and it looks like they have. Well, I should say, it looks like they do have a roadmap, like for the next year-ish or so. I think maybe even going into January, February next year, maybe even up to March. Where basically every 2 months they have like a major update that they'll do to the game, and then obviously in between they'll do like bugs and stuff like that. But like about every 2 months they'll try to do like a major update. So at least they have something. They're you have stuff to look forward to, and they're planning on, so that's kind of cool. um and I've never been a huge like Sims player like back in the day. I kind of dabbled here and there on some of the later ones on 4 and a couple of ones before that. But I kind of dipped in and like just dipped out. And I know people get like crazy into it. There's obviously, for their Sims, there's like a whole kinds of mods that you can do too now. And I think kind of I don't know if there was ever really an official mod thing, because I know there's a mod like program that they're going to actually release. I think with the next big update that they're going to do for Inzoi. But with like the Sims, you're able to, I guess, people just modded it anyways. But here, like they kind of encourage it to go ahead and do your mods and stuff. And it looks like you could even like bring in, like, if you do like a 3D object or something, or like you make something and you can actually just port it into the game itself, which is, I think, is kind of cool. And I might try to do something like that, just rudimentary, maybe like a chair or something, just to see how that works. I've seen people do even going as far as like doing like emotes and stuff like and that might be more involved. Maybe like you can like show the AI or show the program or something an emote, and it'll actually put it in the game. So I thought that was kind of cool. But so far, I've only, unfortunately, I haven't really had too much time because I've been like super busy. I went on a break. That's why I was gone last week, spring break, little vacation. So I was trying to play it on my Steam Deck. I know they kind of said originally that you could play it on the Steam Deck, but it's not verified or even playable right now. But you can play it. But the trouble I'm having right now is anytime I do a save, which is kind of a big thing, I guess, is lately, like at first it seemed to be fine, but lately when I try to do any kind of save, whether it's like a manual one or it does the auto save, which you can actually like change the time limit for 10, like 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes or whatever. It just like totally like locks up the system, and like it goes to a black screen. Like I have to hard power it off and turn it back on just to get the system to do anything. Like I can't even hit the Steam button to like quit out of the game or anything. So it's kind of weird that it's been doing that. I haven't had a chance to go and look online to see if there's if that's like a known issue. I did like a quick search, but I didn't really see anything like on Reddit. So I had to kind of dig a little more. So I've actually probably played it more on the Steam Deck really than even on my PC, because I kind of just threw it on my PC before I went on break and was kind of messing around with it initially with the house build and all that. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty much, you just kind of walk around the town. You can like talk to people, and there's like, if you click on somebody, there's like different like almost like like a radial wheel, and not a wheel, but like a little thing that pops up, like a little bubble that pops up where it has different phrases, or whatever you can do to that person, say to them, or you can tell them to go away and just greet them nicely, greet them meanly, rudely and stuff like that. So it gives you a bunch of options. So it's kind of cool that you can do that. So that's like, unfortunately, that's pretty much all I could say right now. I haven't been able to dive too deep into it. But otherwise, yeah, I'm having a pretty good time with it so far.
So, Tao, I would imagine there's not anything like difficulty levels or any type of scaling, or like, is there any kind of tuning that you could say to say, like, hey, make the economic difficulty high and make the social relationship difficulty like medium or anything like that?
Yeah, you can actually, there's a bunch of sliders you can actually go into in like the world building and world settings. So you can. I haven't, once again, haven't looked too closely on what you can actually do, but I know that's some of the stuff you can like, put down or put up or however you want to mess with it. So maybe even down to like the age and and everything like that. Like if you have kids, you can. That's another thing I think. I don't know if you were able to start off in The Sims with a family. You can actually start off with a family and have a wife and kids and all this other stuff. So and have a baby that'll actually grow up and stuff like that. So that's actually kind of cool.
Yeah, in The Sims you could start off with like a nuclear family. Is it entirely single player, or is there any type of connectivity for you to like be in the same world as like another player or anything like that?
No, just single player for right now, as far as I've seen. I haven't seen anything on the roadmap that they're going to do any kind of multiplayer. But once again, I'm sure that either they'll do it, or I'm sure there'll be a mod that'll be able to do that at some point. So on my PC, when a little bit I have played, it seemed to play fine. Like I had everything, I think, cranked up to whatever the has setting is, either high or ultra for it. Steam Deck, I had to put it obviously down pretty low, and even then it was fine. Like it looked good. It still looked pretty good. So graphically, so it ran. Other than the save issue, I mean, it was running pretty good. I didn't have any other issues once I put that stuff down. So,
But you haven't had a chance to do any of the AI generated stuff then.
I put it on, like when you go to do that, there's that part of it's experimental, and obviously on the PC, I can only do that on PC right now because the Steam Deck's not powerful enough to have that going, in the background. But yeah, you can when you put that on, there's like a little I think there's a button in there that you can press, and you can actually put in some text and say, hey, I want to be a good person, or I like flowers, or you put whatever you want in the little AI description, and then I guess it's supposed to kind of read off of that and do stuff within the world. But yeah, it's been very little that I've been able to fool with that. So, which I find kind of interesting that they're putting that in there too.
All right, man. Swiss, any other questions or comments?
Nope.
Okay, we will move on to game number 3, which is what I've been playing. Amongst other things, I continued at the beginning of the week to work through Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I continued to have adventures that I could articulate at very great length, right, in terms of the details, simply because the world is that immersive. So last time we talked, I think I kind of went through the initial adventure that I had, trying to take down some bandits that I'd come across in the forest on my way to whatever, I can't remember what the name of it is, but the county that's in the lower southwest corner of the map. Might be, I want to say Selenium, but it's not Selenium. It's something like that though, where I was going to work for a miller. The miller sent me on a mission to recover a document that had been taken from one of his workers when that worker got arrested. So I went into the town, met the worker who was locked in the I want to say stockade, but I can't remember I think they're stocks or something like that, where they put you in the public town square where you're in the wooden trapped, like with your hands and your head through, and stripped down. And so I talked to that person and kind of got indicators on where this thing was. Hey DBQ, thanks a lot for joining in. And so went in, and I initially went in the midst and tried to pilfer this place in broad daylight. Got busted, got chased out of town. That made the town go to alert on me, so that if I was ever seen again, like I would immediately get harassed by like law enforcement on suspicion of being a thief or whatever. So I went to a nearby apple orchard where I had discovered like a small like dwelling in a place where I could sleep. And so I slept through the day until it got dark, went back to the town. It was actually too bright. And so there's a little mechanism where you can skip time. And so like I hid behind a well where I could see like a tavern. I had a line of sight to it, and just waited for like 2 hours, and then it was darker, and then I crept into town, went down into this jail, discovered the document, realized that because of where a guard was positioned outside where I'd snuck in, that the only way for me to get out was actually to go through the guardhouse where there were additional law enforcement guys. So they were all sleeping, but still I was on pins and needles because the way this game works, I talked to DBQ last week that the save points are very stingy, and so you have to be very deliberate and tactical. There are stakes, as you go out on these missions. Like I said, when I flubbed it the first time, right, I was hyper concerned that like if I didn't do something right to get to a save state, then I would lose, all of that experience that I'd had in the world. So I crept out of town. I'd found the stables earlier when I had botched the mission. Went in there, stole a horse, and got out of town. So it was very, it's exhilarating, right? The degree to which it immerses you in the world. There's a ton of world building around it. Talking to DBQ last week, I said this is an immersive sim. It's not really an action RPG or an RPG. It's incredibly detailed, right, in your interactions with the world and the things that happen. On another mission that followed after that, I need to find this source of saltpeter, which turns out can be harvested at grave sites. And so I went back into another town to find the grave digger, but he was insistent that I go along with him to collect bodies. And so once again, I had to go somewhere because he didn't want to go that day. He was like, we'll start out in the morning. So I had to go somewhere and sleep. And then I came back. And then he told me to go in and said that he'd set like this trap with a dead deer in this old farmhouse. So I went in, got it, like fought a wolf, came out with it. When I came out, he was being accosted by like 3 bandits. I snuck up behind one, choked him out, but then the other 2 were alerted. The hilarious thing is, everybody just ran, right? The gravedigger ran, the 2 bandits ran after him. I was able to kill one, but then just the way the kinematics of this game works, like it's like if everybody's running at full speed, you're never going to catch anybody because you're all moving at the same speed. So he takes off, the bandit takes off. I guess they went their separate ways, fortunately, and I didn't just like find his dead body. But I lost track of both of them. So I circled back to the wagon. There was an event trigger in that mission. It told me to meet with him. I pulled up the map and he had a little icon somewhere on the map, like on a completely different direction from where he had taken off in. I closed the map, set out in that direction, but sometime between me leaving and me getting halfway there, I pulled the map up again and his icon was gone. So that mission is now just completely busted. Like you can't move the state, like the stage is his, the horses only respond to him. If he never comes back or appears, which I don't think he is, I won't be able to complete that mission. So where I quit and saved is I've got to find some alternate route to like continue on with this particular part of the campaign. So that's just the kind of wacky things that can happen in this world, in the way that all the scaffolding is constructed. So
was that that was a side quest, right? Or is it?
It's how am I trying to explain it? The game is asymmetric in like there are like at least three different paths, as far as I can tell, that you can go through to get to this key node in the campaign, right? So it's kind of a side mission in that it's not necessarily mandatory, but it is mandatory. If you go down that branch, like that's the path you have to go to get to the convergence node, I'll call it.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, because it sounds like if it breaks where you can't complete it, I would be frustrated more so than it feeling like it's immersive, like just it it went down crazy. I don't know.
Well, that's the key thing to find out now, right? So I'm not ready to write it off. Like I think you were here, Swiss, or maybe the other guys were when I talked about my frustration with The Witcher 3, because that game has been on the market forever and there's still like missions that can break, right? You can go off and do side missions and it's heavily event triggered in its sequence. And so if one event fires at a time that they weren't expecting it to, and the way they strung it together, then that mission can completely fall apart. But what I've found so far in this world is that when things break, the story's not over, right? That's just an element of the story. So I've got to go back to it, right, and see where to go from there. So I'm not ready to write it off in frustration yet, because I've been proven wrong when I've tried to do that. So it'll just be interesting to see where it goes, from here.
Cool.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, well, let's go ahead and move on to the tour de force, and start talking about this week's big news. What's the only news? Actually, there were 2 gameplay sessions this week that the various components of the media were invited to. One was for Doom: The Dark Ages, which everyone seems to have walked away with very good impressions of, as well as one for Marathon, which everyone also seems to have walked away with very good impressions of, which to me is leading to some maybe overinflated expectations, because I still feel from a business perspective that an extraction shooter is not the success play to make in the coming market. But we will let that stand. Everybody thinks that it feels good. I'm starting to see game clips show up now, so I feel like some level of embargo has lifted, and so we'll actually be able to see gameplay, or at least maybe more marketing collateral that Bungie is pushing out. But the big thing that sucked all the air out of the room was the reveal of the Nintendo Switch 2. So we are going to start, and I'm periodically going to let the direct play in the background, just for visuals. So because we're going to start with tech specs, and I don't want everybody to just be staring at the tech spec chart for the entire time. But let's start by going over some of those specs, starting with the display. So the screen is a capacitive touchscreen, 8-inch screen. Labels it as wide color gamut. So I won't get into exactly how, how many colors that means. Somewhere along, I guess, the lines of like 16,000 or more. I forget my RGB sequencing. It is a 1080p panel. It has HDR10 support and VRR up to 120 hertz. So let's start the bidding with Swiss. Swiss, comments about the display.
I mean, it's gonna be hard to like comment on the display or anything individually without kind of leaking about the whole thing, but like expected kind of for me. Like it's just like I'm happy with, it's not terribly surprised that they went to a 1080 display rather, with the original Switch being a 720, and glad that they have the HDR support, and I'm glad that they're kind of expanding the screen a little bit. So the capacitive, like the other screen, I'm not sure about the capacitive touchscreen. How is that different than the other Switches or anything like that? But yeah, the VR up at 120 hertz. That's like if it's in dock mode, or no, that's on the
No, that's in
actual screen.
handheld. Yeah.
Yeah, that I think might be the one piece that is a little bit surprising that it can do 120, but
yeah, and supposedly there are games that will run at 120. The big thing about the VRR means that the game can alter resolution, right, to keep up with the desired frame rate. So if you put it in a mode where you do want it to clip along at 120, or I suspect that there will be other modes, the game can intelligently drop the resolution in order to maintain the frame rate. Tau, DBQ, anything you guys want to mention about the screen?
I mean, I wasn't surprised that it was still LCD. Excuse me. I've never had an OLED, so I don't know. I can't say the comparison there. So I'm not missing anything, at least personally, for that. But I know you two, or at least you, I think Game Logic. I don't know, DB, if you ever had an OLED or not. You do or did. So I don't know if you want to talk about more on that. But yeah, I mean, otherwise, I was kind of surprised about the 4K on TV, supposedly on 60 frames. So that should be pretty nice. But otherwise, yeah, I think everything looks pretty good. I'm glad for the bigger screen too.
Yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed the OLED Switch. I waited on a Steam Deck until the OLED. I think that is nice, but what I really appreciated was the kind of hands-on impressions that were coming out the day after the Direct. That the comparisons of people that were expecting to come away not being as plussed by the resolution of the display based on the fact that it's not an OLED, feeling because of the brightness and the HDR that it you're not. I mean, it is not an OLED, but it is not nearly as dark and poor resolution as the original Switch. So I think it's a nice in between spot. As as Game Logic and I were talking last week, I was on the train of we're not going to get an OLED, right? That's a mid-cycle refresh. We're going to sell you multiple systems, and as much as it would have been nice to have Game Logic's predicted 3 SKUs, I think it's a reasonable space for it in terms of kind of the display, the dimensions. So yeah, I mean, technologically, I think the fact that we got the NVIDIA pieces with, we get ray tracing and DLSS potential in there as well. So it speaks, I was glad to see the 4K dock. The fan makes a whole lot of sense in the dock in terms of having that capacity. Yeah, I think technologically wise, it is not as it's not as powerful as it could have been, but it is probably a sweet spot to try to make it as accessible as possible.
Yeah, I think a recurring theme as we go throughout and talk about this is that there's particularly in the realm of technical aspects, but also just in terms of functionality, there's a problem out in social media where a lot of misinformation, disinformation is being put out because people don't read. But additionally, the marketing perspective of this is, and I think the causality behind it is because Nintendo is not accustomed to coming and doing directs where they have to present a bunch of technobabble. That's typically a thing that they try and avoid. But there are particular technical aspects of this console that were left out of the presentation that I think are actually like really, really important. So starting with the display, and this is not confirmed yet, but I did listen to the Digital Foundry breakdown on this. And for mobile displays, for portable displays, typically in order to have HDR support, particularly HDR10 support, that means that it's typically an LED LCD in order to have sufficient backlight, and in order to have controllable backlight to make the variation in coloring that is needed for HDR10. I saw one video clip of somebody at the hands-on impressions that you mentioned, DBQ, and the screen is incredibly bright. Like the original Switch, like if you were, like I would take it on trips like to my in-laws, and like everybody would have gone to bed. And so the lights would all be off upstairs. And so when I turned off the light downstairs, like the house was dark and I'd be on my Nintendo Switch. Like if you tried to use the Nintendo Switch as a flashlight, it was basically useless unless it was an entirely white screen. The video clip that I saw showed a very bright screen. And so there is the potential that this is an LED LCD. And one of the things that the Digital Foundry review mentioned is that if it is an LED LCD screen, and it has all of these capabilities, it will, at the time when it deploys, be one of the best LCDs being used on a mobile device in the market, because there isn't anything else that has those level of capabilities. There has been a lot of bad faith comparisons that have been made to the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck is a 1280 by 800 screen display. It is not 1080p, even on the OLED. And so at 1280 by 800, in terms of the way games display and the way that textures are made, that means most times when the Steam Deck is rendering, it is putting out a visual at 720p. And so, I mean, that is less than, right, the capabilities of the Nintendo Switch 2. So it's really not a good comparison. There's been a ton of comparisons running around saying, just get a Steam Deck. And I'm like, no, like you're actually presenting an inaccurate picture, right? Because the Steam Deck is actually less capable in some perspectives. And that is said from somebody who has two of them and thoroughly enjoys them. That is also not an HDR10 screen, and it is a 90 hertz screen. And in addition to that, and nothing on the Steam Deck runs at like 90 frames per second, right? So it's at best like you're gonna get 60, and so it's just not like using the same capabilities that are advertised here. Let's go on and talk. Yeah,
jump in there. Let's grab some of Hero's comments. I think his Hero Down Under. I appreciate the less toy-like design and the kind of overall design of the system, the LED, LCD. Yeah, I think I think you're right. Like that's a really good comparison, Game Logic, in terms of that the Steam Deck it potentially feels more powerful because of everything that people can squeeze out of it, but it is display wise, it is not as it is not at the same level. And also, I think one of the things that makes any console probably a little easier to design for is that it's a set spec to some degree, where the Steam Deck has the potential you've got to slide all over the place and root it at times to be able to get certain, frame rates and everything else out. So I think that the Switch provides a real high-end mobile gaming experience, or portable gaming experience, I should say.
Yeah, and I do want to reiterate the whether it is an LED, LCD screen, as far as I know, is unconfirmed. I will simply say Digital Foundry mentioned that is the norm that they would expect. And the video clip that I saw showed an incredibly bright screen, like in daylight, under bright lights. And I'm like, if it's not an LED, LCD screen, they're doing something to create that level of brightness out of it, right? With that crispness, with overhead lights in the shot that I saw. So let's move on and talk a little bit about storage. Storage on the device is at 256 gigabytes. Nothing really special to mention solely on the topic of storage that I have to add, but just want to kind of get DBQ your feelings on the storage level.
Do we know what type of storage it is in terms of read-write speeds and everything else? I haven't seen anything about the type of storage.
So I'll go ahead and cheat. You're jumping ahead a little bit on where I intended to address it, but let's go ahead and talk about microSD Express.
There we go. Yes.
Yep. What you're talking about. So with
microSD, so the storage is on the system itself. The microSD Express is if you're going to put an extra card in, right?
Correct, but it illuminates some specifications of the transfer bus that must be in operation.
Sense. Yep, because of the speed of the microSD Express. Yep.
Yeah,
and it is one of the few things at this point running on Express, isn't it?
It is the only mainstream consumer electronic. It will be the first to deploy where it is required. Now, microSD Express has been around since 2019. It is not a new spec. It is, in fact, many devices can use it today. But the difference with the Nintendo Switch 2 is that it will require it. And in fact, I believe the Steam Deck can use it, and I believe the original Switch can use it. It's just that it won't run at microSD Express speeds. And so it's just kind of like RAM or SSDs that you put in a general consumer PC. You can put in RAM that can operate at a higher speed than your motherboard is spec'd for, and you can put in an SSD that is capable of greater transfer speeds. They are backwards compatible, and they will simply run at the maximum speed that the lowest common denominator, right, in the transfer pathway will use. And so those things operate the same way. MicroSD Express is capable, I'm trying to remember, it's typically capable of, I think, 880 megabits per second up to 3,800 megabits per second. So it is a faster transfer speed. The reason why that is in there and the reason why it is mandated is because third-party developers who were being asked, what do they need, what do they want in a Nintendo Switch 2, conveyed to Nintendo that, hey, look at everything else that's going on in the market. Like when we have to port our game to PlayStation 5, that thing has a transfer speed of, they're mandating that people have an SSD with transfer speeds of, I think, at 5,500 megabits per second. We don't want to have to turn a bunch of gymnastics and tricks and tie ourselves into a pretzel trying to squeeze a port for your system of the same game into a much more constrained and constricted transfer pathway. So please give us the maximum speed that you can have if people are going to be allowed to put this thing on external storage. So that's part of the impetus that drove the demand for microSD Express. So again, I don't know exactly. I'm not certain exactly how they're gonna roll the stringency of that out, right? Like PlayStation says, hey, you need to use a PCIe 5.0 SSD or 4.0 SSD. I can't remember which it is. But it has to be capable of this transfer speed at a minimum, right? So right now, today, the only microSD cards that are available, readily available, are the ones being made by SanDisk. Nintendo is also selling their own branded microSD card. It also handles microSD cards up to 2 terabytes, by the way. The Nintendo Switch 2 does. The reason why it's illuminating is because the way microSD Express cards get their speed is they transfer using the same bus and protocol as NVMe. That is over PCIe. And so that's the same bus and protocol that are used for your modern day SSDs. So my belief is that the storage on the Switch is the same thing as an NVMe PCIe SSD. Because it's like that's the bus that's in use for storage transfer.
Yeah, that makes sense to kind of connect those dots that way. Game logic. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. I'm seeing Hero's question down here. Have any of you heard in terms of how, if you can move an existing card into a Switch 2, or if it's going to be formatted differently?
The Nintendo, the Great Britain Nintendo site, since I probably jumped there from like Nintendo Life or something. You can put, it says, so the official site's like, you can use your regular micro SD card in the Switch 2 to import Nintendo Switch screenshots and videos that you have captured on the card, but that's it. So like that's what they call out. Otherwise, it says no. That's the one.
So you have to
asterisk.
re-download anything onto a new card.
It seems like that. Yeah, they say no, but that's the one exception. And then I think like Game Logic was saying, you use microSD Express on the original Switch, but the data speeds are reduced.
So DBQ, did you come across with a feeling, rendering an opinion on storage on the 256 gigabytes?
I think in terms of quantity, I think the quantity is probably, I think it's reasonable, right? Because of the fact that you can add in, I mean, for anybody who's going to be using this as a primary device, they're going to have a SD card in it, a micro SD card in it anyways, in terms of expanding storage. And so I think, what the 256 is the base level for Steam Deck, 512. I will talk about jumping ahead. I think that they were thinking about specs and not necessarily lowest common denominators, but price points on their components in order to try to get a system in at a price point that ideally did not see the type of reaction that it saw. So I think 256 seems a logical, decision point, given what they were working toward.
Tao, any thoughts on storage?
I mean, I was hoping for a little bit more, at least 500, half a terabyte. But I mean, I wasn't surprised really by 256. I mean, you can still put a good amount of games on there, and most of their games are, most of the Nintendo created games are usually, pretty optimized, in smaller download and smaller sizes, so it should be fine. Now third parties, that's where you might have some problems. I mean, I think we all know that, Microsoft said that they're going to put Call of Duty on there. I mean, that's a mode in Call of Duty if you're going to put it on the Switch. So if you're lucky, much less the whole game. So, obviously, yeah, I mean, everybody, people like us, and, I think that even the majority of, people are going to have some kind of SD card in there anyway. So I think it's fine.
Yeah, I'll try and find that information to see if the if the original Switch can use microSD Express, just transfer at the slower speeds. That would mean obviously you could put a microSD Express card in your Nintendo Switch, right, and transfer it to that, and then move it over to your Switch 2. That would at least enable you to get your stuff off of the Switch, right, but not necessarily stuff from the card. There is a system transfer feature that allows you, I mean, so here on the FAQ support site, there's using the system transfer feature, you can easily transfer any digital games you've purchased on Nintendo Switch along with the save data to Nintendo Switch 2. Obviously, you have cloud saves with without Nintendo Switch Online, right? Because cloud saves were around before Nintendo Switch Online started.
I don't think so. I can maybe look that up.
Okay. So maybe you have to be part of Nintendo Switch Online, but if you have cloud saves, then that's a way that you can transfer as well. And then obviously, if you have a physical copy of a game, you just move that over and pull your cloud save down. So Hero says his current Switch card is micro. So I think, just I would say just be careful. Hero, like I have cards that are. They're called microSD Extreme, and they are UHS 1 or UHS 2 speeds. So the microSD Express spec is not a UHS spec. At least it's not printed on there as far as like UHS 1, UHS 2. It is a different spec. So I would just make doubly sure. It says the storage is equivalent to the NVMe. It's big. And then he has a 400 gigabyte card. So again, the Switch 2, as long as can handle up to 2 terabytes. Yeah, I'm sorry. Who's that? Is that Tao?
Sorry, yeah, I was just gonna jump in. You have to have a Nintendo Online subscription to use the cloud saves.
Okay. So I mean, my own feelings on storage, 256. I mean, I think what we saw during the Switch era was that games were like 32 gigs. To be considered like a big game. Cyberpunk 2077 is supposedly a 64 gigabyte game. So at that size, you're only going to be able to get maybe 8 games at a stretch on there, but every game's not going to be 64 gigabytes. Cyberpunk is probably going to be one of the largest games ever. If Microsoft gets around to putting Call of Duty on the Nintendo Switch, during this life cycle, then that's probably going to be a big game.
I'm going to shake my head at that one, Game Logic. I think that given CD Projekt Red and the fact that they squeezed Witcher 3 onto a card, I think that their optimization is going to be something that will be looked at favorably and fondly from others, because I think the fact that we're getting 2K's optimization on the Switch has historically not been great. The NBA 2K is a monster of a storage eater. So even before we get Call of Duty, I'm going to guess that 2K, whether it's WWE or NBA, is going to eat into that pretty significantly.
So you're saying you think it's going to be bigger than 64 gigs?
That NBA 2K? Oh yeah. I mean, right now, if you're playing it on any console, it's 120 to up to 160.
Yeah, but I mean, what is it? What has it been on Switch?
On Switch, it's been 32 to 40 something. By the time that, if you're into a lot of the card collecting and everything else, so yeah.
Well, I mean, the maximum card size is 64 gigs. So, I mean, if they're going to sell physical copies, that's the most they can put on the card.
Right. But I think this would be an interesting thing to see what happens. This is what happened in the Switch generation, is that you had some of the data on the card, but you were required to do a download for additional data.
Yes. And that paradigm to me is almost universally true like today. But we'll talk about digital game key cards later in the show.
I'm the only one that is satisfied with it. Like, I just remember how constrained the original Switch was, and I mean, the other thing is, Nintendo's games aren't. I know you guys are talking about Cyberpunk and stuff, but I mean, I think those are just nice to be able to throw on there.
It's the edge cases.
Yeah, so the Nintendo first party stuff is always going to be the driver of people adopting the Switch. So, I was looking up Tears of the Kingdom was 18 gigs. I think I remember Mario Odyssey when it came out was 12. So you're getting more Nintendo games probably without having to get the expansion card than you an SD card than you would have with the original Switch. So, I mean, it's not great, but when I saw it come up on the Direct, I was pleasantly surprised. I'm like, oh, they aren't kneecapping me like they did on the original Switch.
Yeah, my feeling is I to me it's a firm 5 out of 10. It's not particularly generous, but I don't feel it's egregiously stingy either. You can buy a Switch without a microSD Express, switch to and not buy a microSD Express card immediately, and you will be fine for some period of time. And then you can easily buy an expansion card 3 months later. And for those who's for me, who's something like that would be a requirement. I want to say the 1 terabyte card that I saw today, microSD Express, was $150. A 512 card, I want to say was 60. So the price on them today definitely scale to where if you're trying to get a really big card, it tends to be more expensive. But if you're trying to get a middle of the ground card, they're not ridiculous. Okay, let's move on and talk about video output, because I think we got into this a little bit, but I think this is another thing that needs some technical polishing from some of the things I've seen running around this week. So when you output over HDMI, when you're in the dock and you output over HDMI, it is capable of 4K resolution at 60 frames per second. It supports 120 frames per second at 1080p, and this is a big thing that I think didn't get expressed during the Direct, and that has gotten just out and out said incorrectly this week, but also is just the thing that's just been missed, which I think again is on Nintendo because they're not accustomed to briefing stuff like this. It is also capable of doing 1440p at 120. And so this quite frankly is a mode for me that I tend to use on consoles because I'm not a big 4K person. And I prefer frames per second over resolution. And so when I have the option to get more frames at 1440p, I use that mode even on a 4K television. And this console does have that mode. So I think from my perspective, that is a big plus in terms of its technical capability. It outputs at HDR10. They don't list it, so they only list VRR under the screen and not on the HDMI output. I think VRR requires HDMI 2.1. and so that might be a reason why it's not on there. There's something else that goes along with HDMI 2.1 that I can't remember right off the top of my head. So Hero Down Under mentioned earlier he wished it was HDMI 2.1. I think they stuck with HDMI 2.0 to keep the cost down, and to keep some of the engineering that would be required in the dock down. But now that I realize that means it's not going to have VRR on the screen, and it's not going to have LFC. That's another big thing. Theoretically, for the screen in handheld mode, if it has VRR, Digital Foundry's thought is that means it would also have LFC, which is low frame rate compensation. And so that is a thing. So VRR is supposed to manage ceiling. So as you're trying to go very fast, it adjusts the resolution to keep the frame rate up. LFC is a thing to help you from bottoming out. And so when a game is struggling to keep its frame rate, LFC is a thing that makes sure that it doesn't fall below a minimum. And that for a Nintendo Switch, which is trying to pack a lot of power into a very small frame, is actually like the bigger benefit, I think, of VRR. But those capabilities look like they may not be available on the screen output. So in terms of video output, Tao, any feelings on that?
No, I mean, I was, like I mentioned before, I think I was kind of surprised about the 4K when you have it docked, which is, it's a nice thing. But once again, I'll probably have it here. Well, if I get one, I'll have it here on my monitor, which could only do 1440 right now. So, I mean, it'll be fine for me. So, yeah, nothing too bad there.
DBQ, Swiss, any comments or feelings?
I was expecting, I kind of was expecting this 4K docked and then like 1080p handheld. So it wasn't a surprise. I'm happy for it. I like playing on I probably play docked a lot more than the rest of you. Like, it's just the way I like to play it. So it'll be nice to have it on the big 4K display. Whether the games are there to take advantage, it's like future discussion.
DBQ?
Yeah, now we're getting ahead of ourselves again. But yeah, no, I think having it on 4K resolution is a wise decision in terms of, especially as we think about ports. I play a lot more handheld, but having the ability to play it on 4K definitely will change that. So.
Yeah, no, Heroes made some comments. Everyone, he confirmed that VRR does require 2.1, but he also mentions he's never played the Switch handheld in all its time. And I've crossed over the evolution across the spectrum. I used to be the guy who, if you guys remember, like I always played my Switch docked. Very rarely played in handheld, but as handheld gaming PCs have come more to the fore, I've switched over now to my Steam Deck. I only play handheld. I only have it hooked up to monitors, so for sysadmin and when I need to drop to the desktop. So I keep them on their cradle with the cradle hooked up to a monitor. But if I'm going to play them, I take them off the cradle. So in my mind, if I get a Switch 2, I'm going to play it mostly in handheld. So I mean, we'll see how that goes. Other tech specs: USB-C ports. It has two. One on the bottom, one on the top. The one on the bottom is for charging the console and connecting to the dock. The one on the top can be used to connect accessories and charge. Game card slot, both Nintendo Switch 2 and Nintendo Switch game cards can be inserted. We already talked about the micro SD express card slot. And then for sensors, mouse capability. The same sensors it's always had between the console and the Joy-Cons. And it also, and they have an accelerometer and a gyroscope. The new big this time around is the mouse sensor. Swiss, any particular feelings on the addition of mouse controls?
Gimmick. No, I mean, given the way that I play and I see my kids play and everything, it's just, I don't really see myself or any of us grabbing a book or something to play the mouse controls on. I mean, I'm sure that there's going to be some WarioWare or like the addition the Mario Party Jamboree or something. They're going to have some very, very clever, probably quite fun ways to use them, but I think it's like going to be like a side thing. It's like I liked how they did present it with like the Civ 7. Like I feel like I remember I don't know if it was you or Tao that had it, but it was a struggle. I think I recall you guys saying that the UI just wasn't there, and I think something like the mouse control will be good as like an option. But I just, given the way I know how we play, like having something in front of you to play on is going to be a requirement. I think I saw somebody talking about it. They said it was awkward. Then they tried doing it on their the wheelchair sports game, like on their legs, and it kind of was okay. But yeah, I don't know. It's I think I can see why they added it, but I don't know how many games will really be able to take good advantage without maybe degrading the experience a little bit.
To DBQ, Tao, thoughts?
Yeah, I heard some people similarly in terms of trying drag and drop or drag cross drop on their legs. I heard people say that it worked fine, surprisingly. I think the interesting thing, hearing some feedback on the impressions of Metroid, that to switch, to transfer between mouse and game controls was simply just lifting it up off the table. So kind of technology-wise, I think that sounds pretty well done. I think the use case really becomes the challenge of how often is somebody sitting around, especially if this is a party game, as as Swiss was talking about, whether it's Mario Party or a future WarioWare. What's that surface area going to be needed for in order to sit and do this if you're not, like Tao said, sitting at his desk with it hooked up to a monitor? So I wonder if it becomes like, yeah, this is nice, but how much of it actually gets used outside of a few games?
Tao, any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of like Swiss was saying, like just Nintendo will probably have those good games. They'll have their Splatoons or whatever that's gonna use it somehow. Kind of like how Splatoon kind of incorporate. Well, I shouldn't say. Well, yeah, pretty much incorporated the gyro controls into the gameplay. There'll be a game like that for for the mouse where you can do both, and maybe that's Metroid. Maybe that's that's a showcase for it, because as you saw on the screen a minute ago, they kind of showed how we're using the controller in in the left hand, and as a normal controller, and the mouse in the other hand. So maybe we'll get some more RTS ports. That'd be nice. That's always a good thing. Instead of, since I always thought that the touchscreen would be good for RTS, but with the mouse, that's, I mean, it's pretty much natural that you be able to do that. Hero does make a good comment here about the ergonomics of it. I don't know how comfortable it's going to be. Playing for more than 10, 20 minutes or so. You might get a lot of hand cramps and stuff. I have that issue now just when I'm playing with just the Switch in handheld mode. And I noticed that a lot once I switched over to this. Well, not switched over, but when I moved over to the Steam Deck, like that's way more comfortable, in my hands, because it's just larger. It's a larger controller, or control pad. But yeah, I'm sure, like there'll be Nintendo games that'll use it, and maybe a game here or there once in a while, third party or whatever, that I'll try to put it in there too.
So I did not have on my bingo card that this was going to be the topic, that there would be an extreme schism between the co-hosts on. I'm actually cautiously optimistic on this functionality. Exactly what you mentioned, Swiss, and also you mentioned Tao. They demonstrated this for use in Civ, and I was the person who played Civ 5 or Civ 6 on the Nintendo Switch. And it was a pain. And I think having mouse functionality like puts it squarely where it needs to be. I actually think that this will not be as big of a thing for Nintendo, except for in shooters. I actually think it's going to lead to the thing that you mentioned, Tao, which is we're going to see a proliferation of 4X games and RTSs, especially because a 4X game is the perfect type of game for me that I would put on a Switch 2, take on travel, and then if I'm staying in a hotel, right, be able to spend an hour right in a 4X game with me, or on the plane, right, with my little tray table down, playing it in mouse mode. The notion of the ergonomics, I think that's accurate as far as a perspective on the Switch itself. But there are already people who have put out 3D printer molds for external cases, right? That you drop the controller in, and that you can actuate all the surfaces. I am pretty sure we will see those commercialized, in that you will be able to buy an accessory from Amazon, probably made by some rando company out of China to make them. You'll pay your 54% markup on it for tariffs, but I think that those things will be available on the economy. The notion of using this for a shooter, because I enjoyed playing on the Switch. I felt it was just not great for like as bad as consoles are for shooters in general. In comparison to mouse and keyboard on PC, I think this is a huge lift potentially. So it's just a matter to see, and I think we will see mouse pads, right, that are engineered. I don't know that there'll be anything like super special in terms of material and thickness, but I do think we will see mouse pads that are branded as Nintendo Switch 2 mouse pads from undoubtedly we will see ones from Razer. We may also see ones from Corsair, Logitech, and some other vendors as well.
Well, we'll get that official Nintendo one for like $15-20. So, mousepad.
Maybe we'll talk a little bit about accessories. I don't know for certain because I would have thought that would have been available at launch, and there are more accessories available at launch than there have been for the Nintendo Switch and its refreshes. So maybe, yeah, that's definitely a possibility. I think the next thing we want to talk about is battery, because this is another thing that I think maybe needs a little clarification, slightly teetering on the edge of debunking. The battery in the Nintendo Switch 2 is a 5200 milliamp hour battery. The advertised battery life that Nintendo has put out is 2 to I think 6.5 hours. A lot of the comparisons that I see running around are comparisons to the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck has a 5300 to 5330 milliamp hour battery. And so just in terms of, we're going to talk about price later, it's a very comparable battery to the Steam Deck. It's not like it's a stingy battery capacity, right, for the amount of money that they're charging. The huge difference is, again, points back to the things that I said before. That thing has a 90 hertz screen. It is not HDR. It is not VRR. And it's not going to run games at 120 frames per second. The 2-hour battery life that Nintendo is advertising is for if you are using all of those capabilities in the display and you're trying to run the game at 120 frames per second, you're obviously sucking a much greater power draw off the battery. And then that's what's going to drop you to 2 hours. If you want to play the Nintendo Switch for longer, just don't do that. Right? Put it in a mode that runs it at a lower refresh rate, doesn't utilize VRR. I am certain those are going to be things that you can toggle off. So there will be ways for you to self-manage the battery so that you can get greater than 2 hours of battery life out of it. I don't know what everybody else's Switch experience was, but I typically wouldn't expect ever to get more than 2.5 hours to 4 hours of battery out of that in a gameplay session. I'm probably, even on a flight, not going to sit there and play personally going to play my Switch for 4 hours at a time. That's just me. So I don't know. DBQ, thoughts and feelings on the battery?
I think comparatively, it's kind of where I thought it would end up being. It's in that same space where the original Switch was. Even if being a more powerful battery, like you said, the draw is going to be higher. So it's kind of a non-issue for me. Like, it's exactly kind of where I expected it to be.
Tao, Swiss, any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have any problems with the old Switch battery. I don't think it's going to be, I was probably never playing more than an hour to be honest with you, maybe an hour and a half on a Switch game, anyways. So, and that's really any game, really, not just Nintendo games. So, I like to jump around. So, the battery life was always fine for me. I'd always just charge it, as soon as I was done, anyways, or if I knew I was going to be playing later or whatever. So, not a big deal for me.
The thing, like I mean, I play a lot more docked, but like around my house, it travels a lot. So there's always some kid that's had it and leaves it, and then the next kid finds it and plays it. And one of the things, so the battery overall, like, it's fine. What I hated seeing would be like my kids plugging it in the wall and then playing it, but then the cord's like all bent funny because they're just like resting it on them, and like that really annoyed me. And I let them know. So having the port on top is actually the big thing that I got excited about. I'm like, oh yes, finally! Like they can play it with it plugged in the wall, and I don't have to worry about having to replace the power cord like I've had to do a couple of times already.
Yeah, I think that's another general running theme on the Switch 2 is that I think we'll talk about this mostly when we get down to services. There are more than one thing right on here that I perceive as advantageous if you are using this device in an administered family environment as a parent, than it is just as a single person. You look at these things and I think they equate to a lot of the grousing that I see online about, this doesn't make sense and like why would I ever use that and blah blah blah. But then as a parent, you look at things through very different optics. Some of you will eventually find out, and there are things here, like I said, that I see as advantageous. And yeah, that USB-C port on the top may seem like an incredibly small thing, but absolutely, that is a typical parent problem, right? Is trying to enforce your kids not to use devices plugged into a wall because they have the freaking power port at the bottom of the device and they're bending it up. But like when it's at the top, and that's also like to me is a great thing. Like the fact that the Steam Deck has a USB-C port on the top, so that when I'm playing it in a hotel and it's down on battery life because I was playing it on the plane, right? That to me is not a small insignificant thing. I want to briefly hit the dock design, I think, as the last thing. Only thing I will personally mention on that from my own personal perspective of one thing I do hate is I hate that the wiring harness is still that block behind a shield on the dock. Like that's just like it's everything you hate about having to wire stuff up. Like I'm convinced that there's a way to do that better. It's nice for cable management to be able to put it like behind a trap door, and maybe keep the connectors a little bit out of the way. But it's a super pain in the butt, right? Like, there's no way to plug that stuff in easily. Like, and it's always the HDMI thing is a pain because there's not that much mechanical clearance between where the bottom of the HDMI port is, right, to where your finger can't get in between it and the dock side. Like, I just wish that would have been a thing that they could have done better. No surprise here, it has an Ethernet port. Which was a thing that you could do on the original Switch anyway, if you just if you just use a USB-C to Ethernet adapter. I didn't notice, I haven't looked very close, I didn't notice another USB-C port inside there, like at least on the original Switch dock you had. So I don't know if that will be a thing. And it has two USB. The other thing that I don't like is it's two USB 2.0 ports on the front. It would have been nice if they were USB 3.0. Any comments on the dock design?
No, I mean, I'm not a dock person, so I mean, it's fine to me. But yeah, as far as the ports, USB-C, it doesn't here on the official tech specs. It doesn't say anything about any other USB-C ports other than the charging port. So I think that's the only one, which is, I mean, I guess that's fine. I mean, most everything is USB still, anyways. So LAN port's nice. Like when I do have it docked, that I usually have it connected to my TV where my internet modem is. So I'll wire it in like I have the current one wired in. So that's nice. But yeah, otherwise it's like I said, it's fine for me. I'm wondering how loud that fan's going to be, or it will get when depending on what games you're playing. So, and just in general, I suppose. So we'll have to find out. I don't know
that
if
would
it's
be
ever been
curious to
mentioned in
see.
any online articles or anything.
I don't like the curve, like the profile. That's like a trite comment, but it was something that I noticed. And beyond that, I don't have much to say. None of my docks have the little trap door anymore. That like disappears after 20 minutes. So
right. The one other, and I'll just call this a high hope that I hold out for the mouse functionality. It's interesting to me that they call it. There's a reference to the JoyCon Mouse. They refer to it as mouse controls, and that is a game side implementation, and they don't always talk about, like, it's not tightly coupled to the notion of the Joy-Con. And so you could use a keyboard and mouse with the old Switch. Typically wasn't supported in games, but because I see the verbiage, because I see it articulated as mouse controls enabled in a game, I am holding out hopes that it may be possible to just use a mouse that is not the Joy-Con. Because the inputs, there wouldn't be any difference, right, in the inputs. You could, with the original Switch, use a wireless mouse on a dongle. You couldn't connect a Bluetooth mouse. But I'm holding out hopes to just see if there's anything additional, right, in terms of that capability. And that's that goes to the comment that Hero Down Under mentioned. I personally, like, when I set this up, and all my comments are about using either the Joy-Con mouse or any kind of mouse mode in a dock sits on a desk, right, scenario, because that's the way my game room is set up. Let's quickly run down accessories. Accessories at launch will be the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller, the Joy-Con 2 charging grip. I believe the Joy-Con 2 grip non-charging comes with the Switch 2 in the box. And then you can buy an aftermarket. You can buy a add-on charging grip. They will be selling the left and right Joy-Con 2 controllers. I haven't seen like multiple color schemes and all that like they had last time yet. They will sell the Joy-Con 2 strap as an accessory. There will be a Joy-Con 2 wheel that gets sold as a set of 2, obviously targeting Mario Kart players. There will be the Nintendo Switch 2 camera, unless you guys want to. I don't want to get into a deep dive about that tonight. You can buy a Nintendo Switch 2 dock. I think that is for, if you have multiple TV sets that you may use the Switch on, then you don't have to carry the dock around. There will be a Nintendo Switch 2 carrying case and screen protector that's sold.
Can we stop at the dock for a minute?
Yeah.
Only because of the price point. Like, the dock itself to buy on its own is $110 on their website, which I had a conversation with my kids about this. Of like, that feels high, but originally when the Switch launched in 2017, first party dock was $90. So given what's in it in terms of being able to render in 4K, that seems like but yes, you're right. From a use case, I am one of those where I had 2 docks because of kids playing in multiple rooms.
Okay. I think where I was there will also be a Nintendo Switch 2 all-in-one carrying case that will be first-party branded. So you can buy a thing to take the thing on travel that can house the dock, your Joy-Cons and games and everything. A Nintendo Switch 2 AC adapter, and they will be selling their own microSd express card. So guys, any comments about the lineup of accessories?
No, I mean, I think it's kind of the normal, other than the camera, I guess, because that's kind of a new thing for them. But and I'm kind of surprised that was coming out on launch, I guess, a little bit. I figured that might be a little later, but I guess for what they're, going into the services later, that kind of makes sense for what they're trying to do.
Okay, so I've got a bunch of the services listed in the docket. We'll go with Tao. Which one of those do you want to start with? We don't have to go in order.
You put me on the spot now. Let's go.
And we may not cover all, so
we're not cover. Okay. Let's go with GameChat first then. I think the big thing that they're introducing to their system.
So my pushback on the negative opinion about GameChat is what I've seen is, oh, they put GameChat behind the paywall. And my personal feeling is that every console charges for online multiplayer play. And granted, like you could play free to play games in online multiplayer, but for me personally, from a game functionality, the first reasoning that springs to my mind is, why would you need to be in chat with somebody if you're not playing multiplayer, right? If you're not in a multiplayer game. And I get it, there are party systems, but in 2025, like, I'm sure that there are some people still using them, but I would venture that for a lot of people, online party chat functionality where you just hang out with people on a console platform outside of a game has largely been supplanted by Discord. That's just my suggestion. That's the way I use it. I do not use, when I had consoles, I had stopped using that party chat functionality a very long time ago. And in a world where Nintendo is still a family-oriented, right, platform that is highly oriented around parental controls, it makes sense to me that GameChat would be largely enabled for the purposes of multiplayer and not for a bunch of stuff outside of that. And it therefore also follows suit for me that then multiplayer is behind a paywall, as it is on every single other console. So I don't know. Did you guys have any other thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I think it's, from a Nintendo centric perspective, I can see it as a valuable add-on, right? I see how they get there with the developer conversations of this being started back in 2019 and kind of locking in design choices during the pandemic. Certainly, this feels like a reflective of that. But at the same time, if I think about the almost 150 million Switch owners out there, or Switch consoles out there, that not all of them are as Discord savvy as enthusiasts are. That if a Switch, like, again, thinking about it with a family lens, I think it's interesting that what they showed there were a bunch of 20-year-olds kind of playing this. And whether or not they would have an existing system because they're already in Discord and talking, to me, this feels like it is designed for not 20-year-olds, but, people in elementary and middle school, where parents want a more regulated chat environment that this can provide. Or families in various parts of the country and the world, that this is an easy setup for communication within a game. I think the fact that you can, watch gameplay from someone else's game as they're chatting with you, and even if the frame rates were a little rocky in the direct, which is very understandable. But I think it's a nice feature. It makes complete sense that it's behind a paywall, that we're paying, like you said, we're paying that for every other platform at this point except for PC.
Well, and there's a lot of social features that have been implemented that, as we've seen on other platforms, have become the Wild West, right, of not safe for work type of behavior and stuff. One way to regulate that is to make people pay, because then hopefully, theoretically, the only people using it are the people who actually want to use it, and not a bunch of clowns who are trying to get away with stuff. Like, for my own optic, it's just a thing that it being part of Nintendo Switch Online doesn't increase any type of negative opinion I have of the console, because for me as an adult, I would have I don't need to talk to you in Nintendo Game Chat if we're not playing a video game. Like, I have no need to be social with you outside the boundaries of the game. And if I do, I'm going to talk to you via some other communications medium. I'm going to call you on the phone. I'm going to send you a text message. I'm going to use the 99 bajillion other ways. And so to me, locking it behind a paywall so that you, again, don't have bad actors accessing the system for free makes sense to me. Now, in initial rollout, it's going to be available to everyone for the first year as well. So I don't know, but I agree with you, DBQ, that there will be plenty of people who aren't Discord savvy. I will hold my comment that maybe perhaps therein lies the genius of open world Mario Kart. But Swiss, Tao, any other comments on GameChat?
I was just gonna say that I agree with both you and DB. Like when I was watching it, my first thought was like, okay, they're trying to get into like, that like service, like, people might expect to be able to have the community while they're playing. How are they going to enforce it so that, my children don't see things that I don't want them to see? So, as you said, Game Logic, you have the paywall, and then I'm sure that, we'll be able to lock it down with parental controls. But you're right. Like my oldest still plays a ton of Splatoon 3, and she's on Discord, and that's how she communicates. Like she puts her head, she's playing on Discord and she's on the thing. That's how they do it. But some of my younger kids that might want to play a Mario Kart or a Smash or whatever with their cousins, like I can see this being a more convenient thing than trying to set up like 2 phones or whatever. Like they don't have Discord, or like setting up like, if like, grandma has FaceTime, you prop up the iPad or something, and then like just having that kind of be integrated. Yeah, but is it something that like attracts me to the system in any way? No.
It's been confirmed, correct, that they need to be in your friends list to be able to do GameChat or to do video chat within GameChat. I had read that, and
I thought I saw
it.
Yeah, I thought I saw like them mention that even in the direct. Like I'm sure that they had that, and then they're like, need to make sure we hit these points for the moms and dads out there.
Again, for the parental control aspect of it. Yep.
Yeah, so that's great. It's been confirmed. Then again, that totally makes sense to me, right? Like, this is not an open social medium, right? Now I'm speaking from a parental perspective, right? No, this is not a place for my kids to go hang out, right, with people. You're going to play Mario Kart. Yeah, you can utilize GameChat to talk to people who I've approved on your friends list, right? And with the confidence that those people are behind the paywall, right, and have been granted access. Let's see, Swiss. What topic do you want to talk about from the services list?
Virtual game cards, which they announced at the one prior, the direct prior, saying it would be available at the end of the month for the regular Switch, and I was like, oh, this is obviously something, that they're lining up for Switch 2. But I am simultaneously like elated that they're doing it and annoyed that it took this long, because we have 2 Switches, and it's super annoying to have the digital games and they don't let you move them around. Like the only like it's like, okay, I got one Switch, and then I got this is the one, kids, that you can use just the carts on. And I have a lot of physical games, so that's not been too restrictive, but there are some things that we have digital that would have been nice to be able to move it around. So it's just like, finally, like I can use the Switches, like, me and my wife and the older kids use our Steam family games.
It's almost like you can remote administer them from a server for people in your work group. Like, and again, this is what is flabbergasting to me when people like find this as a negative issue. I'm like, okay, think about it from a parent's perspective. From a parent's perspective, I now have my Switch. I have digital games. I don't have to physically go to a kid's Switch, right, and manage, right, that thing showing up on there. I don't have to worry so much about a thing being designated as the primary. And like, because I mean, I had a problem for a while where I had moved the regular Switch upstairs, and I had the OLED Switch, but I had to. But it was a problem. I can't even remember how it works now. But it was like my OLED Switch couldn't be the primary because I had to get like the games on the other one, and then I'm like, this makes no sense. Like I'm the sysadmin. Like, why is my Switch not the primary? Like, and again, that's a Achilles heel thing that Nintendo did to themselves. But like, I find this like this makes the scenario be. I can see my kid. I can see one of my kids on a Monday morning on their way out to school, and they can say, "Hey, when I get home, I'd really like to play Tears of the Kingdom." Right now, like in a working from home situation, I can find 30 seconds, right? Or I can leave my Switch up in my upstairs office and I can turn it on and fling the thing to them and I'm done, right? It's no bother, no brainer. DBQ, Tao, any other comments on that?
I would just say, as somebody who had 3 Switches in a household, this is a godsend. This and GameShare are, as Swiss said, it took long enough, but it is really considerate way to, and also I think it speeds up the conversion rate for those households to have one system that's a Switch 2 that then still provides, and this is my backdoor way to talk about GameShare, is that it provides the use of those existing Switches if you can use the Wii U technology to stream video onto those other Switches to play. So it still provides a use case there.
I thought they had that though. Like that there was one Switch game where maybe it was the Clubhouse games where I remember like you can put like the 2 of them on the ground, and like I thought that was one of like the things that they advertised.
There was a Clubhouse games, and there was one of the Mario parties that had that as a specific mode type of thing.
Okay, so it wasn't like widely available. Okay.
Correct.
Tao, any comments on virtual game cards?
No, yeah, I think you guys pretty much said it all. I like it. Just basically boils down to with the GameShare, just simplifying the having to have like a family account. So now you can just like you just rent out your game to your son or your daughter or whoever, or cousin, whatever, brother, and then you can bring it back after, I think it was 2 weeks. I think is like the max they can have it.
It automatically comes back.
Yeah, I'm assuming, I don't know if you can set it otherwise, like a different time between those 2 weeks, but yeah, I mean it's just kind of a cool feature and just kind of an answer. I think they saw like, hey, there's people are buying multiple Switches, for their families, so maybe we should try to do something to alleviate that mess that we have in the background right now, the family share and all that. Like you mentioned, Game Logic, you have to make one the home Switch, and and then, which is not going to be yours, it's going to be your kids or whatever. So, and then you can only do it, for really, I think that only work with one other Switch. Like if you had 3 or 4, it's not going to work for that too. So you'd have to like switch it around. So it's just makes it easier.
So DBQ, is it okay if I use your queue to make your choice GameShare?
I mean, I was going to jump to something else since I got to talk about GameShare.
Okay, go right ahead.
Yeah,
we can come back.
I guess I would say, I mean, if anybody else wants to talk about GameShare, let's talk about GameShare. I think another piece that I definitely want to make sure we hit on are the paid and free upgrades for existing games. So, yeah, I think the GameShare piece, let's stay there with that for that. I think that is another, as I said, I think it's designed to provide an upgrade path for people. It works nicely with the virtual game card in terms of other options as well. And I think it is, again, goes back to that idea of, I think it is a way to get other people to experience some of these games, but it also in some ways speaks to an awareness of how supply chain limitations there might be, right? Like if the amount of consoles out there is going to not be as high as they hoped for, GameShare is another way to continue to convert people, even as people wait for availability.
Well, to me, GameShare is a big equalizer. Again, for people who are going to administer these things in a family group. and I know we're gonna talk about GameShare, and then hit what was the other thing, and then hit the free and paid upgrades, and then we'll talk about price to finish things out. But I'll do a slight read ahead on price. Right, Much Ado About $80 games, an $80 Mario Kart. For me personally, the way I view the value prop is on any other console and on the original Switch. If I wanted to play Mario Kart in a family group of 3, I had to buy 3 copies. And that is true on any other console and on PC. If you're going to play, unless you're buying a Joseph Fares game, if you're going to try and play multiplayer with a game, you have to buy multiple copies. You do not with GameShare. And so the Much Ado About an $80 game, I get it if you're single. But if you're looking at it through the lens of a parent, and I'm not saying that's the entirety of the market, but I'm saying it is part. If I buy Mario Kart, yes, I will pay $80 for it. And then 3 people will use that game. And so I take that 80 and I divide it by 3, and I compare it to paying 240, right? And that's not the problem that I think a lot of people perceive it through. Not saying it's a happy price, but I'm saying in my value prop, in my eyes, it's much more of a compromise. Then like extrapolate that to Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, like games that I know my kids are going to play, and then me as a parent, look. I mean, I'm just going to admit my own disposition. Like people on other podcasts know me as well. If there's extra money that I can pay to not have to deal with a pain in the butt, I will pay the extra money. Like inconvenience for me is much more expensive than money. Like the great example that I use on the other things. I hate going to the amusement park. My wife and I have had knockdown drag out fights because that's a thing that is a thing for her. I just elected a couple years ago, I'm just going to pay for the fast lane pass. And literally that has literally helped my marriage. Right? So if I could pay $80 for a game and not have to referee fights between my kids about like who can play what when, or whining and complaining because I'm playing Breath of the Wild when they went like that, I'll pay the $80, right? So it has a different value prop for me. It may not for every single game, but at least there are some practical, pragmatic use cases and scenarios where the value prop shifts and it's not just a linear, hey, this is an $80 game, so that's a problem. Anything else on GameShare we want to talk about? Okay. Paid and free upgrades. I'll go ahead and throw this out. So there will be some upgrades that are paid. There will be some upgrades that you will get from a Nintendo Switch to a Nintendo Switch 2 version if you are enrolled as a member of Nintendo Switch Online. At launch, that includes Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, which to me are pretty significant upgrades. I haven't been able to get explicit clarity on whether or not upgrades will be $10 or $20 or whether or not they will vary. The one thing I will say that I have been able to see clarity in is that upgrades are not simply graphical and performance upgrades. A lot of the comparisons that I see going around are, well, when we get charged $10 on PlayStation, we get 4K 60, sometimes a 4K 120 mode, blah 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 blah. I'm like, in some cases, so number one thing that's huge on a lot of multiplayer games, when you pay the upgrade, that converts it to a GameShare title. So again, I go back to the thing that I just said about Mario Kart. Now I have a game that if I need multiple people to be able to use it at one time to play multiplayer, I don't have to buy another copy. But in some other cases, it will include new levels, new modes, and additional features beyond simply graphical upgrades.
Have we seen pricing? They haven't announced pricing on the upgrades yet, right?
So the pricing that I heard is for the new modes and things like Jamboree for Mario Party and the Kirby kind of expansion almost to some degree are $20 upgrades. Okay. The Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom are $10 if you're not in the Nintendo Online Plus expansion piece. So the other piece of that is that if you are looking to buy a Switch 2, Switch 2 Mario Party Jamboree, the price for it as a Switch 2 game is $80. That it's the $60 game plus the $20 game. So it's, the outrage around Mario Kart at $80. There's a few other games, including Kirby, that will hit that price point when they're adding in content.
Sorry, I don't mean to circle back to GameShare too much, but when you mention like you get the you get the other pieces, everything like the additional content or whatever, like the TV on the Jamboree, and then being able to do the GameShare. The other key piece that I think is really important is you have to share from the Switch 2, but you can share to your original Switches. So that's like, I think, it's not just like, oh well, great, you can share those things, but I got to buy 3 Switch 2s now. Like, no, you can do it from the one. So
Yeah, so
at $20, it's not so bad.
So in my scenario where I talked about that for Mario Kart, that doesn't work because Mario Kart World is exclusive to Switch 2, right? So and I mean, and that's a good segue, right, to get us into price. So part of the thing that's clouding my vision on price is, I am not personally bothered by, well, my feelings go round and round. Let's start with, I am not personally affronted by the notion of the 450 price as much by itself. What clouds my vision is I now don't know what they're going to do about a Nintendo Switch Lite 2. And if I'm thinking about going into this as an investment for a family ecosystem, my problem is maybe 450 is not a big deal for a Switch 2, but if a Lite comes out and it's $299, that's a problem, right? Because now to outfit a 3-unit family group ecosystem, I'm now paying like north of $1,000. We'll just go ahead and go around the room. Swiss, your feeling on the price of the console, the price of the games. Nintendo Switch Online, that price as far as today stays the same, but they are now adding GameCube functionality. There will be a GameCube controller accessory that will come out as well. But in general, your feelings about price for the whole,
As far as the console itself, it was a little bit higher than maybe I kind of expected them to target, just because I think when the original Switch came out, I don't remember if it was 350 or 300.
It's $299.
Okay. So going from that to like a 450 feels like a little bit of a bigger jump, but on the other hand, like inflation and everything else, like I'm not, and if you look at like a Steam Deck or something, right? It doesn't seem, I mean, it's not cheap, but it doesn't seem outrageous or like a ripoff or anything. So, and then as far as games have been concerned, I remember back in the day looking at, like, going to the Sears and seeing the game cartridges and Babbage's, and I remember the prices. So like they've been low for a long time, like relatively speaking, they've been lower for a long time. And game companies have tried to recoup those costs with DLC or whatever. But it's just I'm not outraged about it either. And having taken kids to see the Mario movie, and you think about like how much money you put into like a theater experience and how much entertainment hours you get per dollar, and you look at a video game, and I know how much we play these games, like it's still not a bad deal. Like, I mean, it's not cheap, but I don't think it's a ripoff. So
DBQ. So I think I'll let's talk about, I think the 450 price point seems like they had excuse me, they had a sense of where kind of not only inflation but kind of U.S. tariffs would hit. Thinking about the fact that you've got the region locked Japan only console for 330 is either maybe a little subsidized, but also in order to kind of continue some strength in that market, but also is probably closer to what the actual price point is if we're in the 350 to 399 range. Then you kind of estimate in where they thought tariffs were going to hit. And now with this past week's additions, especially after Nintendo had moved a lot of its production facilities out of China and into Vietnam and Cambodia, which now are potentially seeing 46 to 49% tariff hits. Like, I think to me, that's where we got the knock-on effect on later in the week of kind of suspending pre-orders or delaying pre-orders that were supposed to not launch, but go live on April 8th at kind of major retailers. Nintendo's pre-order system wasn't going to happen until early in May, and that hasn't been delayed yet. But I think it is the reality of they know how many systems they already have on U.S. shores in terms of supply. But when they need to start bringing in other ones and where that price point comes, I think $499 is going to feel pretty affordable if the rest of the video game industry is looking at 25+% on tariffs, at least in the United States. And so I think that ends up, it is higher than I would like it in terms of my own personal space. But also it is for what it is and for the strength of the kind of hardware that we talked about earlier in the show. It feels like a realistic price point. One of the things I had heard, and I haven't seen this in print, but I heard it on a podcast from somebody who is over in Japan on the Nintendo World Report podcast, that the Mario Kart bundle is limited to time. Like, it's only going to be produced for the first 3 to 6 months. And that, at that $499 piece, that feels a relatively solid value for the console and a game to have a pack in there.
Cal?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have a problem with the console itself with the 450, 500 if you buy the bundle, which is obviously you're getting a deal because you get the game for what, $30 less or so. The games I was a little surprised. I didn't think the jump to 80 would be so soon. I mean, it seemed like what was 2 years ago where we jumped to 70. And not all the games are 70, and it doesn't even look like all games will be 80 too, but are also. But yeah, I just thought that was a little, just initial shock, and I was just like, all right, it's, I guess, this is the world today, unfortunately, is how how it is, and that's just assuming these prices stick, with the tariffs, coming in the future, or well, they're already here, so we'll see how that adjusts. And I don't think once they delayed those pre-orders, they haven't said when that's going to go live afterwards, right? They just kind of said, all right, we're going to delay them for now, so we don't know, what's going to happen there. But yeah, I mean, I guess the only problem I had with anything was their tech demo, which they actually said tech demo in the direct was going to be paid for, which I thought was a little weird, and they didn't give a price on that. But
It's they said it's 990 yen, which is right now equivalent to about $7.
$7, okay.
So like I mean, and obviously there's, like as DB alluded to, there's a difference between what Japan's paying versus what we would pay. But I would estimate it'd be a $9.99 game or something.
Yeah.
So 7 to 10. It's not like a $30 thing.
Yeah, right. But then I was also thinking like I guess they kind of did that with the first Switch with 1, 2, 3 Switch was kind of like their tech demo of this kind of the system of the different things that could do more or less. I never played that game. It didn't interest me, but
Well, I'll go back to something. I think DBQ knows this. I think you've read this biography. So I also go back to the fact that what was the packing game for the Wii?
It was Wii Sports.
Wii Sports.
So, and was it Miyamoto who literally had to go to war to get that as a packing game because literally no one else at Nintendo's leadership wanted to give away software that they had spent labor hours on for free?
It wasn't a packing game in Japan. That it's sold as a single unit. Yeah, as a separate SKU. Yep.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point out that corporate culture, right? That may have led to this type of decision.
Well,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tom. I'm sorry. So go ahead, Swiss.
Real fast on that point. Like, I was very happy to see Astro's Playroom on the PS5. Like, I was actually surprised to see a packing game. That was a great game for free. So that comment, Tao, was also in the Swiss household of like, wait, we gotta pay for that? The tech demo?
Yeah, and it's not like I said, it's more or less it's probably not going to be super expensive, but still, it just seems a little weird that they're even calling it a tech demo. Like I don't even know if they should even said that. They should have just said whatever. I don't know how they could have phrased it, but it just seems kind of weird. But like I said, though, it seems like they're kind of doing that anyways, kind of from the last system. So it's not a big deal. I mean, I just won't buy it, obviously. So, I mean, I'll figure out everything on my own, I think, or online videos and all that. So, but yeah.
Okay, I know we're running long, and I know it's late. I'm going to try and run down all of the final notes I have about price. And if at any point there's a desire to jump in and interject a comment, please do. So first question is what are game prices at around the market? I get and I totally understand $70 games, $80 games, right, and consternation with that. One thing I would say is when you look around games at the market, right now, Call of Duty Black Ops 6, the Black Cell Battle Pass is the number 23 bestseller on Steam. So just mentally process that a little bit. That's a paid game on Steam, $70, when that game is available in Game Pass, if somebody so chose. So clearly people have not chosen that. It's a $7 game on Game Pass. There are people, I'm going to extrapolate a little here, but there are people who are buying the Black Cell Battle Pass is not the regular Battle Pass. The regular Battle Pass you can buy with Call of Duty points for the equivalent of $10. The Black Cell Battle Pass is a battle pass you pay for cash, and it is $30, 3 times the cost of the regular Battle Pass. It is number 23 on the Steam bestsellers list, which means there are people who are going to buy that 4 times, $120, plus the $70 asking price for Call of Duty. So they're going to pay close to $200 for this thing by the time it's all over. And I'm not saying that, there's lots of people who are in this whole thing of, the cost of games and the development cost of blah, blah, blah. All I'm saying is that law of economics, people are looking at customer willingness to pay around the market. And this is part of the behavior that's being observed. Point 2 that I'll mention is the $10 jump and how the market usually responds. The comment Tal made earlier about like we got to $80 really fast. My perception is getting to $80 was inevitable. I've commented before how normally the gaming industry has raised prices by $10 every 8 to 10 years for the baseline core SKU. So there have been games, as Swiss mentioned, in Sears that were higher than that. Those were typically for games that had like extra memory on the cartridge or like something packed in with the game. Like I had games on the Odyssey 2 that came with like a game board and tokens and chips, right? Because there were all these like weird manual things. So there have always been games like that. But the core price of the game since the inception of the industry has gone from 30 to 40 to 50 to 60. Now, when we got to 60 in 2005, we held that price for 15 years. And so my prediction has been, when people were complaining about $70 games, I was like, and we're going to get to $80 games, and you should better believe, right, that they're not going to take 15 years to get to $80 games, and they're probably going to do it faster in order to make up for lost time. So that to me is just a reality. Granted, I did not expect it was going to come now, but But here's the thing that I consider, and again, this is me kind of game theorying how Nintendo got to this decision, right? My belief is Nintendo's going, hey, here we are launching our generation. What we choose to do now is what we're going to live in till 2033, right? We're anticipating Xbox and PlayStation are going to raise games to $80, right? Do we go now or do we wait? And the decision I think that they've made is to go now. I also don't think it's not every game that's $80. Some games will be 70. Third parties will choose and decide how much they're going to charge. Not all of them are going to charge 70 or 80. The price of the unit itself, again, I would look around the market if you're trying to understand how like Nintendo got to this decision. 2017, Nintendo wasn't sure if people were going to buy this thing. They came out of the gate at $299. In the time since then, people have bought it in droves to the point where the PC guys are now making their own handheld and flooding the space with more and more product. They've jumped from the baseline Steam Deck to the OLED. The ROG Ally is an $899 console, right? More people are getting in the pool. Xbox is partnering with ROG to push things out. So PlayStation is doing a handheld. If you're Nintendo, you're looking at this thing and going, like, kind of like Apple did when they launched the iPad, and suddenly there was a resurgence in tablet PCs and 2-in-1s, which that industry had largely left by the wayside. Like, you don't have a Microsoft Surface if the iPad doesn't launch in 2007. So they're looking at this and saying, look, our competitors are putting these things out. They're charging $650, $700, $800. Why would we go to market with a thing at $299 when we're going to have to live with that price for 8 years? But my other point is, I think what we're seeing consumer willingness to pay right beyond that $299 price point. Next thing I'll mention is where we're going to be in 6 months with all the tariffs and the craziness and the way that it's going to make everybody raise prices. Nintendo's in the spotlight right now, but in 6 months' time, when they figure out what they're going to do with prices, we are like Xbox is going to have to raise prices on hardware. PlayStation's going to have to raise prices on hardware. There's a good chance we're going to be right back to where Nintendo is the lowest cost option, right? They're the ones who appear high right now, but once things settle out, everybody may have leapfrogged them and be charging higher prices. So that's a possibility. Some people have talked about we're heading towards a video game market crash of 1983, similar to event. What I'll say about that is just remind everyone that, you know, I'm bad even at articulating it this way. The video game market crash of 1983 was not actually the video game market crash of 1983. It was actually the US video game market crash of 1983. The rest of the world was fine. And the rest of the world right now sits outside these tariffs. They get impacted because if the US doesn't buy enough, when it's us and China who are the two biggest markets, right? Then there's not enough like return coming back to build as many consoles, and that causes so there's knock-on effects, and everybody will be impacted. But just before we leap to the conclusion that we're headed for a market crash, just the last time that happened, the world went on without us. Why are they waiting on pre-orders? Just very quickly, I don't think Nintendo arrived at that price by having conversations with Amazon, Best Buy, Walmart, Target, and GameStop. I'm certain that they're talking to those people to find out, what are you guys going to do with these tariffs? Are you guys going to pass it on to customers? Are you going to slap $250 right on top of this thing and sell it for $200 and sell it for $650 at the retail shelves? Are you going to force bundles so that you make it up by basically overcharging people for the accessories, right? Or are you going to eat the cost? Is there some way that we can work together and share eating the cost so you guys aren't all bearing, because what those guys are probably saying is, hey, we were going to order 14,000 pallets of Nintendo Switch 2s, but now we're only going to order 10,000, right? And Nintendo might be saying, hey, time out. before you jump to that conclusion, let's have a discussion, right? And let's negotiate how much we're actually charging you guys to buy this, because those guys are buying the Nintendo Switch 2s, right, from Nintendo and paying for them. And then making it up when they sell them through to customers. One thing I'll mention about the marketing, and I won't get too far into it, but it's very curious. Like you said, DBQ, it's quite clear to me that a large part of this console was engineered during the pandemic, when there was lack of visibility on whether or not we were ever going to come out of the pandemic and ever return to any type of normalcy. because there was nothing about this marketing was anything like the Switch. There were no pictures of Gen Zers out at the basketball court or in parties drinking beer on rooftops, at a bar, hanging out with their Switches, right? They were all in their own abodes, and that's why there's all this remote communication features. So one might also think, not my idea, but I saw it somewhere, that one might also think that Nintendo may not be assuming that there will never be another pandemic, right, in the next 10 years. And so maybe that's also why they put a lot of these features. So I just thought that was curious, that they would go that route.
I think the only place they really show people playing is in those kind of video chat aspects. I think the rest of what they showed was just gameplay. Like, they didn't have to show the use case of what a hybrid system can do, because they've spent 7 years in the market kind of making that case, where the first time they definitely had to kind of make the case of, even the launch events and the press events had like a fake airplane seating set up so that people could see what it was like to put it on a tray table, right? Like, at this point, those explanations don't need to be made, because it's an accepted use case. Going back to your kind of tablet use case, right? Like, people have seen in the market how that is used, to the point that you've got Lenovo handheld PCs with detachable controllers that kind of mirror the same form factor.
Yep. So the last two things that I'll mention is, I'll answer my question, right? And Hero has put it in the chat too, and this is a lot of what I see. Is Nintendo greedy? Look, my personal opinion is, capitalism is greed. No one in a capitalist economy charges you cost. And I think part of the big pushback I have with kind of the philosophy that I see running around is, a lot of people are saying Nintendo can't justify this price. And I'll just say, this is my perspective. There's only one market in which companies have to justify their price, and that's in government contracting. When we submit bids for government contracting, we have to show labor categories, experience, how much it costs to build the gyro versus the rudder versus the jet engine. If you're under FAR clauses and Sarbanes-Oxley and all this, you have to have rigid accounting principles, and you have to show them, right, how much something actually costs. And they can tell from that how much profit you're making. That is the only space where a company has to justify costs. Commercial companies rationalize costs, and they rationalize that based on what it actually costs them to build it, and then the ration that they put on top of that is, what is the customer willingness to pay. That is a basic law of economics that Adam Smith wrote about in 1776. I don't think it needs to be a conversation today. Nintendo is charging, just like they did with the Nintendo 3DS, where they tried to come out of the gate with that thing at $250, and within 6 months they saw that it didn't have uptake, and they dropped the price down to $170. This is what companies do, right? Is Nintendo greedy? Yes. All capitalist companies are greedy. All of them are out trying to make money. All of them have a fiduciary legal responsibility to return maximum value to shareholders. That is the top line in their list of roles and responsibilities. And so if Nintendo and all their calculus determine that they believe and have convinced themselves that there's a customer willingness to pay these prices, that's why the prices get set. I saw a really great quote today on social media, and that person said, corporations set prices, and then it's up to consumers to set value, or to establish what their value prop is for that. To me, it's not any more complicated than that. There's a lot of gymnastics going on about, like, why is Nintendo greedy? I'm like, yes, they are. I expect them to be. That's I expect all companies to be. Where I personally am on the purchase of this, the price, like I said, this is what scares me, right? Is how much, am I in for a penny? Is that going to make me in for a pound? And how far am I going to get dragged down here? I have signed up for pre-orders. I will be transparent about that. I've signed up for pre-order notifications on the Nintendo Direct site, Best Buy, and GameStop, because I just don't know, right? If I'm going to get FOMO, if my kids have said that they want Switch lights. That's the trigger that I have. And I'm like, if I'm going to get them Switch lights, I'm not going to administer it over the web. Right, I'm going to administer it from a Nintendo Switch 2. That's just a pain. I'm sick and tired of the Amazon Kindle Fires. They are sick and tired of their Amazon Kindle Fires. They want something more robust for gaming. They're sick of digging through the pile of trash games that there are there. and trying to find the gems. And the end result always is they find 2 or 3 games that they like and they play those forever. And so my options are, do I get them iPad minis, right? Or do I get them maybe a Nintendo Switch Lites? The iPad mini, I think, has some upside to it, but it also has a lot of downside negative to it. So that's where I am. I'm not on the fence. I would say I'm 70 to 80% no, 20 to 30% yes. I would actually say 80-20. But it's a wait and see. Any other comments on where anybody is on this? Definitely in the pool, definitely not. Wait and see.
Yeah,
let's take a pulse. This is a good way to end in terms of where we're at in terms of decisions. Go ahead, Tao.
I was gonna say, yeah, I signed up for the Nintendo. Hearing from them from the Nintendo store, and I think I did Best Buy also, and that was just those 2 for now. We'll see. I mean, like I said, I can do, I could do the bundle at 500. I might go a little bit more than that, but I mean, it's really gonna tail the tape is what it's gonna come out to initially. So I might have to wait, which is fine. I mean, there's plenty of games I got now, and stuff like that. But I've always been a Nintendo guy at heart, so I kind of hate to not be able to play, at launch. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Okay, so I'm gonna count Tao as an in. I am going to mention right now, yeah, if these things go up because of tariffs, I'm definitely at like the prices right now. I'm at my cap. Like if they don't move something that I can rationalize into, well, with tax, I would have been, or what I played for like my PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 3 bundles.
Yeah,
I'm definitely out. Swiss, how about you?
We're probably in. Like we already have the shoebox that there's a collective effort to merge allowances in anticipation. But I think I'm kind of like Game Logic. Like if this jumps to like $600, it's probably not happening. So
DBQ.
I've signed up for pre-orders as well, but more so for my kids. Like they're both my kids are in college at this point. We made it through multiple Nintendo cycles of me being the driver of the excitement. The Switch, the original Switch was definitely, they were just as excited as I was. That I signed up for it probably because I won't get it, but I don't have a lot of trust that we're going to have the quantity of supply is going to be pretty low, I think, especially with the tariffs. So if I can get in and get them access to one that they might not get someplace else, I think that's probably where I would end up using that pre-order is kind of a pass through to them. Because if these tariffs hold, I think prices are going to go up, but prices are going to go up on a whole lot of things. And my capacity for disposable income certainly takes a hit. So I think that's where, like, if I can get in before the price goes up for my kids, I'm glad to. But I am kind of counting on the fact that we are going to see increased prices on a lot of electronic media and consumer devices in a very short period of time.
Yeah, and so that's part of the optic, right? And like I said, I totally get and understand how the 450 price was unappealing to people. The risk in where we're teetering is probably what I expect to happen. Is prices are going to go right. If prices go up on that, prices are going to go, like, you're going to think about alternatives as a gamer, and all those things are going to have higher prices. Like I said, the other consoles are going to raise prices, phones, tablets, consumer electronics, PCs, PC parts and components. Every place that you turn to try and escape the price markups is probably going to have the price markups. The last thing I'll mention is, like, the big piece of advice that I had my epiphany about tonight is, like, if you're a PC gamer, and I would slide this over to also to console gamers, right? Although I think your options will be more limited. What I would say is, like, the thing, like, hoard right now. Like, if you see sales, get stuff. And I don't mean hardware, I mean software. And if you're on PC, get 4X games, 80-hour games, stuff with high replayability, things that these never-ending games, right? Like Age of Wonders, Civilization, first-person shooters, right? If they have what is the thing that I'm thinking about? DBQ, procedural generation,
Sure.
Get like if you don't have Diablo 3, 2, 3, and 4, I would say get them. Like if you can get them at sales price, like hoard content, because we may be in for like a long chilling effect, right, on the market where new games may be less frequent, new games may be significantly marked up. Anything you can do to shore yourself up in that manner, great. Because the way I've been thinking is I could be sitting on the precipice of like where I can't do like a PC upgrade, right, for a very long time, right, until things settle out. So just something to consider. Gentlemen, any other parting comments or thoughts?
No, I think we've covered a whole lot. This was great. I'm glad I got here in time for the Switch discussion. And I think ending on the fact that we are looking at a steep cliff in terms of price increases across the market is a realistic way to end here in terms of kind of where the industry in America is going to be, what we're going to be faced with.
Yeah, and again, I mean, a lot of the conversation winds up being, you're defending it, or you guys are again. My point isn't to tell you that you should find the price fair, right? Like that's a decision you have to make on your own. My point though is our point is to try and go like think about it as if we were in the boardroom, right? What would be the conversation? What would be the game theory? How would we get to this price? And seeing some logic and rationale, right, in how they got there.
Well, and I would say that if people are feeling like Nintendo is kind of milking the price, I would turn that back around in terms of looking at the economic factors that are causing that, and that if those tariffs were not in place, then those price points could be much closer to what Japan's are in terms of the console. So rather than being upset with a company who's responding to market forces, look at what's causing those market forces.
Yeah. And like I said, part of the formula is I won't say milking the price, but part of the formula is like again, I think a thing that gets bypassed is they sold 67 million copies of Mario Kart, right? That is an indicator of customer willingness to pay, right? That title does not go on sale. It sells at full price, right? And they've sold it to almost 50% of their install base. They've sold 150. And the other thing that's kind of funny to me, and this is again, this is not me defending it, but this is my laughing to a certain extent at people who I think are getting the predictions wrong. And I go back to what I said at the beginning of the show, right? This is right where we were back in 2017. In 2017, lots and lots and lots of people said this thing's not going to sell. Nobody wants a mobile device. Nobody wants like these bare minimum specs. Nobody wants to play it. Specifically, the big thing was nobody wants to play those PC ports of games that everybody's already played 5 years ago, right? But here I'll come back to this is the problem, right, with that prediction. CD Projekt Red, Ubisoft, From Software Games, these guys are not cutting engineers loose to spend hundreds of hours on porting a game because they think it's not worth their time, right? Because they think it's an endeavor that's going to lose them money, right? I said this 2 years ago. Like, I was surprised at the number of PC ports that continued to come to the Nintendo Switch, right? Which tells me from an economic and market perspective that they must be seeing the demand there and they must be making money, because otherwise then why would you bother? So, I don't think the predictions of failure that everybody's like, and again, tariffs can blow that whole thing up, right? But I say taking that off the table, I think to me, from an economic assessment, it's hugely clear that the demand signal is there, right? And whether or not, the market says they're willing to pay those prices, that is what we have to wait and see. I'm sorry, go ahead, Tom.
I was going to say, if you look at their launch lineup, it's like 90% remasters and old games and stuff like that. So and people will buy them. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like there's new people out there that have never seen these games before, and like they're going to pay for them. I think there's only like maybe 2 or 3 like original games besides Mario Kart that are coming out. So I mean, they know what they're doing. We'll just say it like that.
Yeah. And and this is what we always have with Nintendo, right? So many times we've been in a year with the Switch and we're like, what's the big thing, right? Like when are we going to get the word? And a lot of us don't get the word as soon as we think. And then there's always a steady, more than the other 2 consoles, I would say the steady battle rhythm and cadence of releases from their production pipeline, to me, has been the most consistent out of Nintendo of the other two. Xbox's output was anemic at the beginning of the generation. PlayStation's is numerically maybe where it needs to be, but in terms of kind of like marquee properties that create a lot of buzz from a marketing perspective, it's not there as it was in the last generation, in my opinion. So I think that's where we wrap it up. Sorry, I know this is hugely over, but I also think this is probably one of our biggest shows of the year. The week that the Nintendo, it's not every now and again that new hardware gets announced, and this is probably one of the most controversial announcements that there's ever been, where there's so much polarization of how people think about it. So I think it was important for us to get it out, and hopefully we don't need to spend the rest of the year talking about the Nintendo Switch 2. So thanks a lot, everybody who joined in on the live chat. Thank you very much, Hero Down Under. We appreciate you. Warawana, Innate, we appreciate you as well. For anybody else who happens to swing by and watch this video in its archive format on the E2KG Network podcasting channel, we appreciate you as well. Please feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel, so you can just receive a notification whenever we post new content. I think we'll be back next week, although attendance of co-hosts may be differentiated because I think some of us have spring break. So that's a thing that we'll discuss. Either way, we'll put out word on my social media and on the front page of the YouTube channel about whether or not we have an episode next week or not. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe out there, play the games that you like, come here to talk to us about the games that you love. Once again, my name has been Game Logic with my partners in crime, Mr. Swissguard, Mr. DBQ Hams, Mr. Townmaster. Thank you for one of the most epic episodes of the show since we've been doing this. Until next time, good night, good luck, and good gaming. That's going to do it for us. We're out of here.